quite significant, and we've seen manifestos being launched. Particularly this past weekend, we saw the EFF launch its manifesto, and in the week ahead we're going to be hearing from the President as he gives his State of the Nation address. So what has business interest in all of these events? Well, to help me discuss this, I'm now joined by the COO of Business Leadership South Africa, Busi Mavuso. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for inviting me, Peter.
So business will undoubtedly be looking at all the parties' manifestos. This weekend it was the turn of the EFF. And I just wonder, what is your reaction and your thoughts to some of the comments and promises made by the EFF should they come into power?
Peter, the EFF manifesto is unaffordable. There is no way, given the current economic climate, that you're going to be able to effect that. If you had a country with high levels of domestic savings, then maybe that would have been feasible. But sitting where we're sitting as a country, where we are dependent on investment, both local and foreign, to can effect some of the things that we need to effect, there is no way that you're going to be able to achieve what they want to achieve. And they're going to have the difficult job, even if they were to come in power in May, to sell their manifesto to investors. And I think that is therefore going to be, an issue. I'm afraid that what they are promising is unachievable, and unfortunately, should they come in power, they are not going to be able to deliver.
All right, so let's look at a couple of those things. I mean, one of the things they said is that we're going to link Eskom, social development together, so that if someone who receives a social grant, then they can also receive electricity and other necessities free. I mean, it sounds like an innovative way to look at it, because you can give someone a social grant, but if they can't afford electricity, then there's no use for the social grant.
But then you're going to have to look at the sustainability of Eskom. This is an institution that is currently dysfunctional. This is an institution that is currently in ICU. This is an institution that has to borrow just to pay salaries and pay their finance costs, every month. We are struggling now where NESA is sitting, where Eskom is trying to motivate why they need to be given a 15% revenue increase. So if you're going to expect Eskom to therefore give these subsidies, what therefore is your plan? How do you deal with the 400 billion debt that Eskom is sitting with? How do you deal with their month-to-month obligations that they therefore need to? So the feasibility thereof. So from a social perspective, from a socio-economic perspective, I think their intentions are good. But I'm afraid that they're definitely not going to be able to deliver exactly, and I guess when you look at their constituency, this is precisely what those people want to hear. These are the people that are your public Joes. These are the people that are dealing with bread and butter issues. So they definitely want to hear that messaging, and that is what the EFF is selling them. But unfortunately, they're definitely not going to be able to deliver.
So what about their view on minimum wage? They said this 3,500 Rand won't work. And he says that they're going to give massive pay hikes to people across the board. But he said that this will be funded by tax breaks to companies and businesses so that they will be able to employ people and pay them.
So again, you're going to have to say, if you're going to increase the salaries to those margins, we're currently sitting with an issue where we have one of the lowest productivity levels, as a country. How are you going to deal with that? If you're going to be talking about localization, as I spoke about, how do you ensure that you still are able to compete, internationally, so that these companies are still profitable, as it were? So how do you therefore balloon, the salaries as you're going to balloon them as a cost to revenue to organizations? What does their bottom line look like, and to what extent are they going to be able to compete? Because remember, we're an open economy, which means that not only we're competing amongst ourselves, but we're competing amongst, the rest of the world. And how do you deal with those issues? So I don't think this is thoroughly thought through.
So essentially what you're saying is good intentions, some good ideas, but perhaps need to be thought out a little bit more in terms of the accounting side of it. All right, so this week the President is going to be addressing the nation on the State of the Nation. As business, what are you concerned about? I would imagine the economy is one of the things that's key.
The economy is the main thing. I think Cyril's toughest job is that of corruption. how are we going to arrest corruption? What are we going to do with what is coming out of this commission of inquiries? And by the way, I don't think that the letter from the 5 world powers is actually out of order. You know, these are people that are responsible for 75% of foreign direct investment in this country. And they are saying to you, if you want to see continued investment in South Africa, you know, we are worried about how you're handling corruption. And look, from the state capture issue alone, South Africa has suffered about 100 billion rands. If you look and say, what is the opportunity cost of that? You know, would we be sitting with 37% unemployment had we been more careful around corruption? You know, we're sitting with 53% poverty levels. We're sitting as a country which is has got the highest Gini coefficient, making us the most unequal society in the world.
So people will turn this and say, but hang on, you know, this corruption is usually between the private sector and the public sector. And so part of this is you as business, actually, that are contributing to the problem.
We absolutely are. As you heard, Agrizi is actually directly implicating business. You know, you've seen it with the Steinhoff, you've seen it with KPMG, you have seen it with, you know, but I think when you're dealing with public funds from a government perspective, you know, you are sitting with SOEs that have put the country in a position of 670 billion exposure, you know, in the form of bailouts. You're sitting with SOEs that have been hollowed out. You know, the opportunity cost therein is the public goods. The opportunity cost therein is the houses, the education, the health that you actually have to deliver to the people. So I think we need to arrest it from there, but government as well. So if you agree that private sector is the corrupter and government the corruptee, then should we as government officials be entertaining, you know, corruption even when it's advanced by the private sector? Right. We ought to be knowing better as government.
So what 1 or 2 big things do you think that the president needs to do to create an enabling environment for business so that you can build businesses that create jobs?
So we definitely the issue of corruption, and I think we need to be dealing obviously with the issue of the policy environment. You know, to what extent are we going to ensure that we are creating a business-friendly environment, especially if we are seeking to bring in 1.2 trillion rands. How are we going to ensure that the investors locally and abroad, you know, find South Africa as an attractive investment destination? Because remember, we're not the only one. We're competing with the rest of Africa, you know, in terms of being the investment destination. So what are those policies? What are those interventions that we're going to put in place to ensure that we are seen as the, you know, most attractive investment destination, as it were? So the issue of jobs is going to have to be spoken to. The credit rating agencies are going to be looking. So we're going to have to be talking to the issue of institutional strength and fiscal strength. What are we going to do with the debt to GDP ratio that is currently sitting at 55%? What are we going to do with the 170 billion, you know, interest alone that we're paying in the country, you know, per year? What are we going to do with protecting Chapter 9 institutions? You know, when we are busy as the ANC talking about the independence of the South African Reserve Bank, you know, it therefore says, you know, to foreign direct investors, is this a country that I can come into? You know, and to what extent is there a regulatory environment that which is going to protect me? How are we resolving the land issue? You know, if we agree that we're amending Section 25, what does that mean? What impact is that going to have on the property rates? So we definitely need to be clarifying those.
All right. Yeah. Okay. We'll see. We're going to have to leave it there, but I'm sure many conversations ahead, particularly after the SONA. Thanks so much indeed for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
All right, so that's a look ahead to the SONA, which is taking place this week. And what will the president say? Well, business has just spoken, and what their hopes and wishes are. We'll keep a track on that for you.